I mean, I also don't think there's any huge evidence that negotiations produce nuclear non-proliferation. I just think this is a very...
Come on.
I think it's
the entire history of the post-war era.
Please like, subscribe, and share. Mehdi Hasan appeared on the right-wing podcast Triggernometry, where he debated several issues. In this clip, he discusses the war with Iran and the topic of nuclear proliferation with the hosts. We're going to watch parts of that debate and break it down. I'll also share my thoughts along the way. Let's dive in.
There'd be people who go, well, look, you've mentioned Hezbollah. Iran funds Hezbollah. They fund Hamas. They effectively destabilize the region. I don't say that I agree with this, actually, but they would say, look, if we deal with Iran, long term, we're going to get a better, more prosperous, more stable Middle East. What would you say to that?
I would say Benjamin Netanyahu said exactly those words in front of Congress in 2002. He said, if you invade Iraq, there'll be positive reverberations throughout the region. What happened? We got ISIS, we got Al-Qaeda in Iraq, we got 20 years, we got 7/7 bombings in London. Tony Blair was warned, if you invade Iraq, there will be bombings at home. The Joint Intelligence Committee told him in 2003. He ignored those warnings. We got more terrorism, more blowback, more violence, more regional instability, more refugees. That's what I fear is happening now with Iran. In terms of destabilizing the region, look, this is where we get to, like, where do you start the clock? I would say, yes, of course, Hezbollah and Hamas destabilize the region, but they would argue, and many people would argue, that the destabilizing began with Iran. They are a reaction to Israel's actions. So, you know, it depends where you want. Like I said, 1982, Israel invaded southern Lebanon. There was no Hezbollah in 1982. So, look, Iran does play a role that is malign. I've never defended blindly Iran. Iran does bad things. No one's debating that. Many countries in the Middle East do bad things. We are not invading Saudi Arabia. I think we would all agree around this table does bad things, has done bad things. We are not invading and trying to topple Saudi Arabia or bombing their oil fields and gas facilities, and I'm glad we're not. So I don't think this war is a solution to the problem. By the way, what is the problem? Donald Trump will not tell us what the goals of this war are. It changes every day. Marco Rubio says it's degrading the Navy. First they said it was a nuclear program that they obliterated last year in the 12-day war, apparently.
There's a lot of evidence that the nuclear material may well have been removed prior to this strike.
But I'm saying this war was not about the nuclear program because it done nothing to...
That's actually the thing that they have said that makes sense to me. Like, I think I'm actually kind of with you in terms of I don't understand what the goals of this thing are. If we take it that the nuclear stuff and degrading the military, that's fine. But then why are you killing their leaders? That's the bit I don't understand.
Well, interestingly, they're not killing their leaders, right? They killed Khamenei, but the Israelis are doing much of the killing. They've killed the intelligence minister. They killed Ali Larijani. Now, let's just deal with what Israel wants, because what Israel wants is pretty clear to anyone watching. They want an unstable, weakened Iran that doesn't pose a threat to them. They don't care if it's a democracy. They don't care if it's a dictatorship. They don't care if it's civil war. They just want Iran off the table, right? And therefore, they're killing people who might do a deal with Trump. They've done this before. Last year in the 12-day war, they tried to kill a guy called Ali Shamkhani, who survived. Then they killed him now. He was a negotiator who Trump had been praising and reposting on social media. They killed him because they don't want Trump to do a deal with this guy.
Why not?
Because they don't want to negotiate a solution to this conflict. They want to keep going, the Israelis, until they wipe out everything they want to.
Yeah, they want to degrade Iran.
They don't want Donald Trump to do one of his deals. That's the worst thing they could have done. They didn't want the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal that Obama signed, that resolved the nuclear program for at least 15 years. They were dead against that deal.
But so was Trump himself.
Yes, and Trump pulled out of that deal. And then what happened? Enrichment went up. Then Biden came back in, said, let's try and go back into that deal. The Israelis attacked Natanz in 2021. They enriched up to 60%. Then last year, they went to Oman to negotiate. They had a meeting scheduled for Sunday. The Israelis bombed on Friday. This year, they negotiated in Geneva. The Omani foreign minister came to DC and said, a deal's on the table. Apparently, Jonathan Powell from the UK said there was a deal to be done. Guess what happened? The US and Israel bombed the next day. There's a history of Israel in particular, but also the US, bombing every time we're close to a deal. Every time there's a negotiation in place.
And this is why we just come back to the nuclear point, because I agree with you. It's very clear that there's a difference between the interests of the United States and the war goals of the United States and the war goals and interests of Israel. And Israel's war goals and interests are actually very clear. I'm very unclear as to what the US wants.
Well, if it is the nuclear program, I think we're both unclear, but if it is the nuclear program, I don't think they know. But if it is the nuclear program, this is not the way to do it. Negotiations are the way to solve Israel. Most experts say you cannot bomb away a nuclear program. It's in people's heads. It's scientific expertise. You cannot kill every scientist and academic.
You can destroy the nuclear material.
And then they can and then years later they can rebuild facilities and enrich again.
Sure.
And then you're just mowing the lawn, as the Israelis say, going and bomb every couple of years. But we had a JCPOA. We had a deal that was working. The IAEA said Iran was in compliance with it. Do you know how much enriched uranium they had under the JCPOA? 3.64%. You know how much they have now? 60%. You know, you want to go back to logic. Logic tells me that was a failure to get out of that deal.
I mean, I also don't think there's any huge evidence that negotiations produce nuclear non-proliferation. I just think this is a very...
Come on.
I think it's
the entire history of the post-war era.
Well, if you look at Ukraine, for example, Ukraine was forced to give away its nuclear weapons and made itself very vulnerable. And I've been on record as saying, I think that in and of itself and the fact that we haven't supported Ukraine properly will lead to more nuclear proliferation.
I agree with you on that.
And I think on this issue too, I don't see what the incentive would be for Iran not to pursue nuclear weapons.
Well, we're in agreement, but not just Iran. So I interviewed, again, if you guys remember the Iraq War, do you remember Mohammed al-Baradei? He was the head of the IAEA.
Yes.
Him and Hans Blix went to the UN and said, don't invade Iraq. We were
both against the war in Iraq.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying this to you, because I know you understand. He said, we can guarantee disarmament. He was the head of the nuclear watchdog, spent his life opposing nuclear proliferation. I interviewed him recently. I said, if you were in the Turkish government right now, which Israel is saying is next, would you try and get nukes? And he said, yes. I was astonished. This is a man who's devoted his life. Because, as you say, everyone now has an incentive to get nukes. But why would you not?
No, my point was even broader than that, Mehdi, which is that I think everyone always has the incentive to get nukes. And that's where I don't think negotiating with Iran...
So that's where we disagree.
Hold on, but let me finish the point, though. I don't think that's... In that situation, I don't think Iran has any interest in that. Iran is very clearly... The reason the Gulf Arab states and Israel all want Iran degraded and all supported this conflict, by the way, and are still encouraging it, the Gulf states, especially internally. The people at the top, the people on the street may not, is because Iran wants to dominate the region. It's a perfectly legitimate thing for Iran to want to do. But that being the case, the fact that they fund proxies to facilitate that process, of course they'd want nuclear weapons, and I don't think they'd negotiate them away.
But they already did.
So when it comes to countries pursuing nuclear weapons, I think what the Triggernometry host is saying actually reflects a broader reality. Over the past few months, with Donald Trump making threats toward multiple countries and the actions the United States has taken in places like Venezuela, it's not just the Middle East anymore. You're seeing nations in Central and South America thinking, we need nuclear weapons as a deterrent so the U.S. doesn't try to interfere with or overthrow our governments like it has in the past. That ties into what Mehdi Hasan pointed out in the debate. When he asked whether someone like the leader of Turkey would want nuclear weapons, the answer was yes. And honestly, if I were leading any country outside the US, I'd probably feel the same way, because the US is either starting conflicts or threatening them across different parts of the world. As for Mehdi Hasan going on Triggernometry, I really don't get why these shows keep bringing him on, other than the fact that it gets them views. Every debate I've seen him in, he comes fully prepared, backed with facts, and ends up dominating whoever he's debating. Even if you don't agree with him, that's just the pattern. I especially like that he brought up Saudi Arabia. I talk about that a lot, too. When right-wing platforms like Triggernometry go on about how bad Iran is, Mehdi doesn't deny Iran's issues. But he also points out that Saudi Arabia has done plenty of bad things as well. And that's where you see the difference, because a lot of MAGA or right-wing voices won't acknowledge that, likely because Saudi Arabia is a US ally. Still, it's one of the most repressive regimes out there, and it rarely gets the same criticism. So I'm glad Mehdi called that out.
US intelligence, they suspended whatever nuclear weapons research they were doing in 2003 after the fall of Saddam because they didn't want Bush to invade them. There was also a fatwa from the late Ayatollah Khamenei saying that nuclear weapons are haram, forbidden under Islamic law, which is ironic. People are now saying, I hear supporters of Khamenei saying, that was a mistake. He should have actually got
But under him,
weapons.
They did enrich more uranium.
But they didn't build weapons. Enriching uranium is their right under the NPT. Every country has a right to enrich uranium. No, not to 60%. That was a bargaining.
But they did.
That was a bargaining chip.
Well,
why did they enrich to 60%?
Because they're saying, if you keep pushing us,
exactly.
if you keep...
Israel attacked them, so they went to 60%. They only went to... You say Iran wants to dominate. This is why it's so important for your viewers to understand the timelines here. I know in the West, we're kind of brainwashed by some of our media and politicians to believe that Iran is this Hitler country. And again...
I'm not saying that.
But I didn't say you said that. I said some in our media and politicians brainwashed over the years. Triggernometry is a great show. It hasn't been here for decades. I'm talking about the last 30, 40 years. Have been told Iran is the great, just like Iranians say the great Satan, Iran is also the great rogue state in the Middle East. Actually, when you look at it, Iran is the country that is actually now being bombed, was attacked from 1980 to 1988 by our ally Saddam Hussein, attacked with chemical weapons, lost 500,000 people, had their plane shot down by the United States of America. And then they agreed to negotiate a deal with the American government in good faith, and with the EU, by the way. The JCPOA was with the US and the EU. Iran stuck to that deal. Trump tore it up. Trump violated that deal by pulling out of it. As I said, they then began to increase enrichment only after the deal was done. So I don't accept your premise when you say, of course, they want to get nuclear weapons and enrich. No, they signed the JCPOA, which says in the first paragraph, we will never get nuclear weapons. That's what they signed on.
But they then took that money and used it to fund their terrorist.
Okay, but now you're moving the goalposts. I just want to stick with your nuclear point. No, you made a very strong point about nuclear. They have an incentive to get nuclear weapons. I'm saying there's no evidence of that. It's the exact reverse.
The incentive is clear. You're saying...
Now they have an incentive for sure. They just got attacked.
They always did.
Well, of course. I mean,
if you want to be
strategically, yes, there was a... But the irony is they didn't. That's the irony. If they did, they'd be fine. Ayatollah Khamenei would be alive, chilling with Kim Jong-un right now if he had got nukes like Kim Jong-un did. Let's just be very real about that. There's a reason why Pakistan and North Korea, which destabilized their region much more than some would say Iran, are fine because they have nukes.
We're in complete agreement.
But Iran didn't get nukes. This is the great irony here. They didn't get nukes. They got attacked. The leader got killed. And now I'm hearing you say it's because they wanted to get nukes. It's the exact opposite. If they had gotten nukes, they'd in a much safer place. Instead, he put out a fatwa saying no nukes. He signed up to the JCPOA, which many Iranian hardliners were against. Khamenei signed on to a deal that people in his own country said we shouldn't sign on to. They then stuck to the deal, according to the IEA. Trump then tore up the deal. They then marginally increased enrichment to 20%. They then got attacked by Israel in 2021, increased to 60%, and then last year got attacked during negotiations. And again, this year got attacked during negotiations. And one last point, the Gulf countries, it's just not true. The Omani foreign minister just wrote a piece for The Economist magazine. Oman got bombed by Iran. And even he's saying, it's very rational for Iran to do what it's doing. This is an Israeli war that America's been dragged into. America needs to be independent from Israel. The Qataris, I've spoken to very senior Qataris privately, who of course are mad that Iran are bombing their oil gas fields, but they know who they blame. They know who started the war. It was Israel and the United States, and they're reaching out to the US, telling the US, stop this. So maybe the Saudis, maybe the Emiratis wanted this war, but not all of the Gulf countries. That's just not true.
Fine.
All right, if you want to watch the full debate, it's about an hour and 20 minutes and covers a range of topics. You can check it out on the Triggernometry channel. One point Mehdi Hasan raises toward the end really stands out, and I think it'll be remembered as one of the most significant moments in recent U.S. history. First, the nuclear deal that Barack Obama made with Iran to limit their enrichment program, arguably. Claim Obama sent pallets of cash, but that's misleading. It was Iran's own money being returned as part of the agreement. Once Trump tore up that deal, the U.S. started to look unreliable on the global stage. And it's not just about Iran. Between that and things like tariffs and broken agreements, other countries are beginning to see the U.S. as a partner that can't be fully trusted. You can have a steady administration like Obama, Biden, or Clinton make agreements, and then one unpredictable leader comes in and throws everything out. That kind of inconsistency makes other nations hesitant to work with the U.S. at all. We're even seeing it now, with allies reluctant to back certain military actions. And when the U.S. acts aggressively toward a country that didn't directly attack it, especially one. Agree with Mehdi Hasan and his arguments about Iran and U.S. policy, or do you side more with the Triggernometry hosts? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.